By the way, guys, I realize that these are long days. If you need to get up from your chair and just pace in the back so you don't break your back, I'm totally cool with that, right? So, what I want to talk about is really the title in the slide versus the title in your abstract is a little different, but it's the same concept. I want to talk about simple ways to detect complex things. And the use case I want to use here is PowerShell, because I love me some PowerShell. I'm a huge advocate of it. A little bit about me. I'm the 555 author. I'm kind of a new guy on the block around SANS. I'm kind of slowly coming up the ranks. I'm a GSE. The thing that usually shocks people is I do have 58 certifications, which means absolutely nothing, right? Other than I need to get a life, okay? But if you have questions about being a pimp, sorry, I had to throw that out there, or CISSP, which blah, if you have questions about those, feel free to ask. But having that many certifications means nothing other than I can social engineer my employers. Well, my previous ones, because I don't work for them anymore. Talk about social engineering. The thing I'm most proud of is I do have my own business, H&A Security Solutions. That's not what I'm proud of. What I'm proud of is this GitHub, which is actually switched over to here at this point. Anything we build, whether it's for SANS, whatever, we give away for free. We crowdsource everything. It's awesome. We work with folks like Mick, other organizations, Innovative Solutions, John in the back, lots of Austin. We have lots of folks, and we're just giving this stuff away. It's awesome. With this talk being PowerShell, how to detect it, would we agree that PowerShell attacks can be pretty freaking complex? Pretty awesome? Yeah? It's scripting. It's complicated. I do want to give a special thanks to Lee Holmes and the whole PowerShell team, because how they've implemented, especially in the newer versions, allows us to take something that is extremely complicated and we can actually catch it with high fidelity and fairly easy. Now, this doesn't mean that this is going to be perfect. I'm not going to cover every single advanced attack. Like, there's new ways you can disable PowerShell logging once it's on without actually permanently disabling it. Not going to go there. I'm just going to talk about what works in like 99.9% of the case. Okay? So simple things that just work really well. Okay? PowerShell is freaking awesome. So you've heard that I was the largest security onion deployment in the world. You want to know how I got there? Want to guess? PowerShell. I automated the entire deployments where there was literally no touch. It was zero-touch deployment. You have, hundreds or thousands of branch offices. Well, usually there's a server that ships out there. My team doesn't prep that. But I have a PowerShell script that would automatically deploy the security onion on their box as they're deploying it, automatically. Once it's out in the field, it would automatically find it, set it up, join it to the domain so we could do 80 logons. All of this, PowerShell. PowerShell is awesome. As a defender, if you're not using PowerShell, you are totally missing out. The flip side of that is PowerShell is totally freaking evil, right? But that means it's an equal opportunity employer, right? We don't discriminate. Good or bad, we'll take you. That's PowerShell, right? Everybody has their own unique opportunity. All right. It's especially useful for attackers because it's that whole I'll live off the land, right? And even better, your antivirus, your whitelisting solutions, EDR, all this stuff. Now, this isn't always true, but in 99% of the cases I get engaged with the client, it's whitelisted. It's allowed. It's going to work. Because PowerShell is hard to lock down. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's not locked down. In most environments, it's not locked down. So adversaries can just fly right through your security techniques. They can basically do anything. It's such a great talk, even the birds are coming. All right. Who has used PowerShell? Do you feel there's really much you can't do with it? Like on a Windows box, you can here, you want a little sneak peek, 555's virtual machine? It's a Linux box. It has PowerShell on it. You can do all the things. So it's on your box. It's easy to access, and it's really easy to kick things off. We have things like PowerSploit, niching. We have Mimikatz via PowerShell. We have all the things. You want to control IOC devices. By the way, little sneak preview. If you come 15 minutes early to Sim Net Wars, because I want more people to come, I'll show a bonus session where I use a Sim alert system to automatically control a smart light bulb. It'll change the color based on the number of alerts in the system. All right, we'll throw that out there just for fun. PowerShell can do that. Python can do that. Scripting frameworks are awesome. Rubber Ducky, we've got Bash Bunny. This is like a less than $100 device that can keyboard attack. You know, I can walk into an organization, plug it into anybody who forgot to lock their screen, and it will shell home over PowerShell. It's called the 1-second bash. Boom, gotcha. That's creepy awesome. Don't worry, most people lock their machines, right? Well, apparently, same thing, you can have it emulate a NIC. This is thanks to Mubix on Twitter. Yeah, it's Hack5. It's a Hack5 item. Yeah. Plug it in a locked machine on Windows, and guess what? It can find your password. That's bullcrap. But it works. So we have weird, creepy things, all these awesome tools. So let's just disable it. Well, has anybody tried disabling PowerShell? One, you break crap. And two, we don't want to disable this. We need this. Again, I automate my IDSs. I automate my frickin' next-gen firewalls with PowerShell. I automate Linux. I obviously automate Windows with it. I love PowerShell. If you're not using this as a defender, you're missing out. So we can't really disable it. So we could turn to prevention techniques. Execution policy, which is not really a security feature, except for there's like 15 different ways to bypass that because it's not a security feature. This is you run a PowerShell code and it says, due to the execution policy, no. There's 15 different ways, there's probably more than that now, how to bypass that. It's not really a security feature. And we're focusing on detection, but I just want to go through these real quick. Constrained language mode. That's pretty easy to enable, and it does a fairly good job at blocking malware. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job. And then GA, I wish more people were doing, but it's not as easy as it needs to be. It's getting there. That was like whitelisting for PowerShell. Who can do what? That's what GA is. And it has logging, by the way. So, okay. We want to do this from a SIM. This is the SIM Summit. So what logs can I do that allow me to simply catch PowerShell? We've talked about these bottom two. Process creation events, event ID 4688. 4688, that's built in. We've got sysmon, event ID 1, the number 1 event ID. It's that awesome, right? So we can watch as PowerShell is being launched from a command line logging. What we really haven't talked about is PowerShell itself has different layers of logging. We have module logging, script block logging, and transcription logging. I'm going to fly through these real quick. The slides you'll have access to later, and we can get you those. So module logging, this is the older logging format. If the newer versions are much better. It's event ID 4103. This is every single time, basically, you invoke a commandlet, it's going to cut a log. If you do get-child item, and you run it 5 times, it's 5 different logs. Okay? So, as a result, it's huge. Watch this. Invoke Mimikatz. If I want to steal your credentials out of RAM, and I'm doing module logging, that generates a small amount of logs at 8,555 events. By the way, 555's in there. I just want to point that out. Yeah. You know, I've taught this slide 4 times now, and I didn't realize that. It's speaking to my inner 555. So it's very high volume. That's crazy. That was me running one script, by the way. One common malware script, invoke Mimikatz, almost 9,000 logs. So it's a little chatty. Module logging, by the way, is actually one of my favorite logging solutions, and I'll come back to why and how to address that. Script block logging, this requires version 5. You should be rolling 5.1 at this point. Always just roll the latest PowerShell because it's freaking awesome. Right? This is going to give you event ID 4104. It's going to log the entire script block. Basically, like if you're in the PowerShell editor and you have 5 commands, it's going to log them all. These can result in some massive logs, by the way, like 30 meg single log, Windows. And even then, because malware can have such long scripts, it can exceed that, and it'll have to page it over multiple logs. But this supports that. By default, it's going to do things like if certain PowerShell commandlets are used often for evil, it's supposed to have an event type of warning. The problem I have is that often flags on scripts I write that are for good. So I haven't found a lot of value in that. But the fact that I can get Windows logs in the formats we have, this is awesome. PowerShell event 4104, we want this. And same attack, invoke Mimikatz. Instead of 8,555 events, now we only have a whopping 509. In all fairness, if you enable these loggings, they're not that high volume for everything. This is just invoke Mimikatz is a very big script. Okay? Now, it's still going to be huge logs, but we're getting a little different here. We still don't have output now. This is going to give us the full script that was ran. It's not going to give us the output of the script. Transcription logging is going to give us that. The downside, though, is script block logging and module logging are events in Windows. Transcription logging is a text file. But it gives you everything that was ran and the output. So for example, I run ls, just because I still use Linux quite a bit and I'm used to using those aliases. Right? ls, a file share, and I made it where it intentionally would fail. So access to the path is denied. We can see that. So you get the full enchilada, right? Do you have a question? Yes.
It's not secured and it's echoed.
If you're doing the secure string bypass, it's going to show. But yeah, that's a very, very valid point. Thank you, Mick. So all right, I want to run through that. One more thing, and then I'll go into some cool detection. You have to have logs before you can use them, right? So I have to cover that. And my famous child crying, because this is again my inner 555. What do you mean no logging on desktops? A sad face, right? 2/3 of you did not raise your hands stating you're logging on your desktops, which means you can't catch PowerShell. Done, right? You have to use endpoint suites or something. It's going to be much more difficult. The techniques we're going to cover are really simple to implement, but they require logging on the desktops. Or transcription logging to a shared, you could have this output to a shared folder. Pick it up there. That's a different approach if you didn't want to collect at the endpoint. So all right, you have to have the logs in order to do these things. So let's take a quick look at what we're dealing with. These are 3 different PowerShell attacks, by the way. Notice they all 3 have something in common. That is simply that they are being ran directly from command line. See that? They're directly run from command line. When you use PowerShell in your environment, do you write your scripts and run them directly from the command line like this? Let's say this wasn't base 64 encoding, which is what you're saying. Let's say you just had your 1,000-line PowerShell. Would you run it from the command line? No. You write it in a .ps1 file. You save it and you run the script. So one huge distinguisher we're already going to see is most PowerShell attacks are issued over the command line. They either are massively long PowerShell, whether it's base 64 encoded or not. They're commonly base 64 encoded. And ways like the Bash Bunny, that 1-second plugin I talked about, it's going to do one of these bottom ones, where it's either base 64 or not, but the actual PowerScript that you're going to run, the PowerShell shell, is sitting on a website. And it runs a very small command, which then retrieves additional PowerShell commands and runs that. Right? So there's a huge distinguisher. So why run from the command line versus a script? Antivirus? It's writing to disk. It's more likely to hit all the new ways that PowerShell can be blocked. Writing to disk is one of the easiest ways to get yourself caught. It's one of the ways they're trying to evade that. That gives us an ability to take their strength and turn it into their weakness. This is a huge thing with 555. It's like an underlying theme. Attackers are going to do this, therefore we can turn that against them. If they're going to use things like base 64 encoding, if they're going to use really freaking long command line lengths, if they're going to be pulling down additional code from the internet, it lets us know we can turn this against them. So let's just go through some of these. And I'm going to cover my favorite PowerShell technique last, by the way. It's like the one that I catch almost everything with. So I promise I'll give that to you. All right. First one, very simply, command line length. Again, if you're going to write anything that's over a couple hundred characters, you're probably going to put it in a script. Hopefully. Either you're really freaking good with the keyboard, or you're copying and pasting out a notepad. I don't know why the hell you'd be doing that, but hey, that's all going for it. So something as simple as looking for length greater than 500 characters. Pick a number and go with it. How many times do you think your vendors are going to fall over this? Because your vendors use PowerShell. There's very little false positives. For my testing in multiple organizations, I get few false positives just by doing something stupid like a length check on command line, 4688 or event ID 1 sysmon. This is pretty easy to do. It's a very simple win. Base 64, where's Kevin? Kevin, where you at? You moved over there. Okay. Here's our log enrichment. Boo, yeah. So this is me with Logstash using a very nasty regex, which is probably not true base 64, by the way. But it's good enough and it works. And I can take that bottom PowerShell base 64, and as the log comes in, and here I'm using Logstash, I'm automatically decoding it, not decrypting it, decoding it, so you can see what it is. Well, let's just assume that we have SIMs, right? I think that's a safe assumption here. What are things that your SIM could automatically detect as wrong with the decoded portion of this? What do you see that's wrong? All right, even forget your SIM. Personally, what's wrong with the top portion? Throw some things out. Don't be shy. We're going to sit here all day otherwise. Oh, that was too much. Upper lowercase, I love that. Upper lowercase. What were some of the other ones? You go like all, first you're like quiet, and then you're like blah. It's obfuscated. Well, I'm talking about the decoded portion. Uppercase, lowercase. All right, I'm going to go through these just for time. Upper lowercase, we have it reaching out to the internet. We have system net web requests. We have proxy credentials. We have all these weird things. How hard would it be to do something like look for uppercase, lowercase with your SIM? Isn't that like machine learning awesome sauce? Or is it more like, well, capital S, there's one uppercase. Lowercase y, there's one lowercase. F. Or have a case-sensitive search. But what I'm pointing out here is, if you were to look at these, it's almost like a 50-50 uppercase to lowercase, which the human language does not do. So even by simply counting the volume of uppercase to lowercase, you could actually catch that. I'm not saying you could. I'm just saying there's so many things totally wrong with that you could do that. Yes?
I think there are some tools out there that do like entropy across that to catch. That's still sort of obfuscating. The whole point there is to bypass simple string matching.
Yes. Which also goes to the other gentleman's point of if you just lowercase it or uppercase it, that'll help do those checks too. But yeah, no, you're totally right though. Absolutely. So there's totally multiple things wrong here. So again, nothing complex here. We can catch this stuff fairly easily. Even stuff like the download and execute. If I see something like IEX, which is invoke web expression, or new object net web client, how often are we running PowerShell code that we're pulling from another source? We don't typically do that. So even seeing those combinations of things, dare I say it, blacklisting, I don't care, it works. It really does. Blacklisting's fine. As long as you're doing it with intent and it doesn't create a bunch of false positives, blacklisting's awesome. Blacklisting by intent. All right. Other things the attackers can do. PowerShell 5 is insanely more secure than the older versions. Right? So what they'll do is they'll run PowerShell and they'll tell it to run version 2, version 3, version whatever. Because they don't, even though you have PowerShell 5, you actually have the older versions as well. It's kind of like you have .NET and you have the older versions too. So what they can do, even to get around logging, is they'll just downgrade PowerShell. They'll run an older version. Well, we're screwed. Hang up our hats. We're done. Now, That cuts a log in itself. We got, I believe this is event ID 400. It's going to show that the PowerShell version that was ran in here is 2.0. Well, if you have 5 installed, you shouldn't be literally calling the older version of PowerShell, because you have to literally call it. If you call PowerShell.exe and you have 5 installed, you're running 5. You have to literally tell it to run 2. And we can see that with this log. It's very easy to set up an alert for that. So again, go ahead and bypass it, because we'll catch that. Simple event ID 400. This is by far none my favorite PowerShell detection technique. And if you want to argue with me that this is too hard to pull off, we'll go out back and we'll duke it out. Okay? This is, again, doing Kevin's log enrichment technique here. This is a log stash command I'm doing. All I'm doing, which, by the way, I'm lowercasing. You guys pulled this out. So this is event ID 4103. This is module logging, by the way, which is very chatty. What I'm doing, and this works with transcription logging or script block logging, you just have to do a different approach. I am using my ingest, in this case logstash, to grab every single time I see a commandlet. Get SSH session, remove SSH session, out null. And I pull those out into an array on that log. Basically, I know every single PowerShell commandlet that's being ran in my environment because I take a test group of systems, I collect 4103 events from them, I run this, and it extracts all the commandlets that my environment's using. What can I do with that? That's my baseline. That's my whitelist. So collect whether from a sample, whatever. I pull these in. There's my whitelist. And then I turn around. Anything new is an alert. Yeah, go for it, Carson. Have I pen tested the regular expressions that Oh, sure, yeah. If I'm not careful about what I'm doing, I could totally get my parser compromised from bad regex. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's totally fair. It'd be interesting to try, too. So, if it works against this one, let me know. But you also can sanitize your output once you're pulling things out, too. Yes, thank you, Carson. I like that. So, okay, so we grab this whitelist. We export it. We use it as a lookup table. I don't care what you're doing. You want to know an advanced technique for this? PowerShell is really freaking chatty. You can also use your whitelist and say, if all the commandlets in this are on that whitelist, don't send them over. Or drop them. I don't want them. I'm only looking for things new, because I can only handle a small volume of PowerShell logs. You can totally do that. So now we have this. We have things like sub, sign, int, unsigned. I have no clue what that is. That's actually one of the commandlets inside invoke Mimikatz. There's obviously clear ones like, I don't know, inject DLL. Like that stands right out, right? But they could have anything that you don't use, and you will catch it. How often do your PowerShell commandlets change? I usually ask this, and it's great, because usually people will argue this one with me. That's totally fair. We write new PowerShell scripts every day. Well, that's awesome. I write PowerShell scripts all the time, but I don't use new commandlets all the time. And if I do, what is that? It's a false positive, and how long does it take me to handle that? Add it to the whitelist, move on, we're done. Yeah?
So again, it depends. I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, go for it.
People who monitor an enterprise 2 million servers.
Yeah.
And they're going to have new commandlets all the time. They're going to see every single one ever known to man.
Yeah, if you're doing extremely vast enterprises, I'd be curious to see how many false positives you get this. And I don't know the answer to that one because I'm not running this in organizations past like 50,000. So Carson challenged me, but he has no data to back this up, by the way. No, that is totally a fair point. And what the point is, try it.
It's an assumption, though.
Yeah, it is an assumption. It is totally an assumption. And you have this thing called a SIEM, which means you could put exceptions, like certain users, I'm just not going to do this technique on. Yeah, whitelist all my standard users, ignore any service accounts, ignore my IT folks. We have SIEMs. We can think outside the box and apply the technique differently. But this is by far none my favorite way of catching evil PowerShell. In the organizations up to 50,000 nodes, this has worked really, 50,000 endpoints, this has worked really well. Yeah?
So when I play around with it, and there's a couple great scripts for doing variable changes within any sort of media arrangement like that, right? You run it through, put it on an article,
Right.
build a topic, and then you go this and go that.
Right.
You modify it, you change it to a commonly used command list. This method.
This method would break if you could change the name to one you have in your organization and get it to load before the built-in OS one. Yes. But I haven't seen malware that's actually doing that. Probably is. No, and it totally is possible. But in again, I said 0.1% I'm not looking at. This is the 99.9% of all the other attacks. Damn you. No, feel free to challenge me. Carson, go for it again. Yeah.
There's a good way to make queries based on something like this melt. If you have a given field that you're expecting to be relatively low cardinality,
Right.
and you have an adversary inject a very high number of unique values,
Right.
it may make your pipeline query melt because your intermediate result set is too large. And instead of your detection expiring, your query will simply time out or run into a memory too large.
Sure. Could we use this as a denial service against the ingest? Yeah, absolutely. I will take those odds, personally. But that's a valid point. And I think points like this, by the way, are important to call out, because is it possible for me to denial service my log ingestion pipeline doing this, or even your post-ingestion pipeline, depending on how you're doing this? Absolutely. But as defenders, we still need to give it a try. We totally still need to give it a try. And by the way, if they do things like start using the names I'm already using, we can just up our game again. Then we can do the whole cat and mouse thing. Because I could whitelist commandlets against parameters. That same thing I just did can be, and now it's going to be even harder. Possible? Yes. But this does totally work. So let me repeat that, make sure I'm getting it right. So what you're doing is when you're doing management scripts, you force that through some type of asset system that's running it instead, and you whitelist that. Yeah, that's totally valid. Yeah. Yeah, and that would work really well, but there's also a lot of PowerShell use cases, whether it's service accounts, vendors, so that's why I like to do this approach. But I love that. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Guys, let me breathe here. No, go for it. Go for it.
Could you tag your legitimate PowerShell scripts, just have a tag in all of them and just search for anything not tagged?
Could you just tag all the valid PowerShell commandlets you're used to seeing? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And you could tag the other way.
Yeah.
You choose your pick or poison. Yeah.
What about digitally signing your scripts?
Digitally signing your scripts, what about that? Yeah, that'd be great. Again, I find that a lot of organizations have trouble tying their shoes. So for me to get them to digital signatures, like 90% of my clients are not going to get there. But if you can, absolutely. But you're still going to have a lot of like vendors or these other one-off exceptions, which we could just filter those out. But you're going to have those. That would significantly make your life easier, absolutely. And you could do things like, is it digitally signed versus the commandlets, and make different rules off of that. So I do love that. I do love that. So what happens if PowerShell is ran outside of PowerShell? Because that's possible. It's actually really easy. If you're used to seeing PowerShell.exe, just like Mike talked about CMD versus ComSec, same thing. What happens if we see PowerShell being launched in an odd way? So PowerShell.exe is not PowerShell. PowerShell is really DLLs. Windows uses lots of DLLs. So we see these three common DLLs. If those are loaded into something, they're PowerShell. The way to catch that is sysmon. Sysmon event ID 7 will load the DLLs being launched into a program. I've had performance issues with sysmon event ID 7, by the way, if you turn this on. But you can turn it on only for certain things. That's the beauty of sysmon. Unlike like 4688, which is all, sysmon lets me tailor it. And it looks a lot like this. Hey, look, we're seeing install util.exe running PowerShell underneath the hood. This is one of the Black Hills information security's methods of running PowerShell without PowerShell.exe. Easy to catch, assuming you're doing DLL monitoring. If you have Carbon Black or other things like that, if you have DLL monitoring, you can see this. Okay? Is it perfect? Probably not. But in 99.9% of the cases, it's probably good enough.